Let me say good afternoon to everybody and to welcome you to this legislative luncheon. Particularly, we want to thank the members of the Richmond delegation for giving us their time today. I think this is one of the better attended legislative luncheons that we've had, so thank you so much to the Richmond delegation. Let me just say one or two things as we get started to provide some context. As we prepare for the General Assembly session, I think it's important to mention to the members of the delegation how far we have come and to recognize that we still have a lot of things that need to be done. But it's important for us to recognize that the most pressing need we need to face in the city of Richmond is the fact that we have 1 in 4 citizens who live in poverty. It's important for us to say, as we set the context for this meeting, that we have made progress during the last 7 years. We're in a stronger position now than we were 7 years ago. Back then, like most states, we were in the midst of a global recession. And over many, many months, I'm proud to say that together with City Council, we have weathered the storm. We've built up our financial reserves. We've invested in basic infrastructure. We've strengthened our city's hand. And now the numbers are showing that the city is turning around. We have 6 bond rating upgrades from Wall Street. We have those bond rating upgrades were reaffirmed just a few weeks ago. For the first time in generations, the population of Richmond is rising. We've built new schools. We've upgraded our libraries. We've paved miles and miles of streets. We've built a new justice center. We've been involved in alternatives to incarceration to keep people from going to jail in the first place. And so what we have to the members of our delegation is a resurgence in the city of Richmond. Richmond is a cool place to live. We feel it every day as we walk the streets. People want to live here and businesses want to invest here. Not to mention the cycling championships. And the cycling championships, which we know were extremely exciting, but for the delegation, we need to mention that it could not have been done without a partnership with the state of Virginia. The state was a great partnership, and we are happy to announce that the partnership between the state and the city has grown over the years. And it's important for us to maintain that relationship as we move forward. In a moment, you're going to hear several legislative proposals. Some of them are familiar, and some of them have been proposed before, and you're going to hear the same things from many other local governments around Virginia. But as we get ready for our session, we'd like for you to just kind of keep 3 or 4 things in mind, and then I'm going to turn it over to the President of City Council. As you hear all of these proposals, if you would be kind enough to keep in mind, the city of Richmond has 26% poverty. Decisions made 60 and 70 years ago have left Richmond with some of the largest concentrations of poverty in the United States of America. Those decisions have led generations of families to have no hope. Those decisions have caused public housing to fester, and it's important for us to make sure that when we listen to the proposals, we keep those things in mind. We've made historic investments to fight poverty in a comprehensive way. However, we need a strong partnership with the Commonwealth that prioritizes reducing poverty. And while that seems to be just a moral responsibility, it's also a financial responsibility, because when Wall Street comes to Richmond, the first thing they ask us is about our poverty rate and what we're trying to do to bring it down. It has an effect on how we are able to sell bonds, and it has an effect on how much money we spend. The second criteria is how does this proposal help raise student achievement in our public schools? You've been hearing and reading a lot about the infrastructure needs of the schools, and those needs are extremely great. But we also need to spend time identifying ways to raise student achievement levels and test scores. And this is especially true when it comes to funding public schools jointly between the city and state. The current system simply does not sufficiently acknowledge the unique needs of urban areas, and I know you know this, but it bears being repeated. that the system that we have does not treat us fairly and give us enough money to do what we need to do? And thirdly, how does this affect the finances of the city of Richmond? Like all localities, we're opposed to unfunded mandates, and we ask that you would help us to look out for them at any opportunity you have. And then finally, I hope that when you are there during the session, you will look for ways to help us strengthen our bond, our brand. It's an intangible request, but it's important because people around the world know that Richmond is here now. We have identity not only in the state, but throughout the country and throughout the land. And so it's important for us to ask that you will help us in forging strong partnerships between the city and the state so that we can continue to build the brand of our city. So if you will keep those four things in mind, we would deeply appreciate it. And so I'd like to invite now our President of City Council, Michelle Mosby, to come and give her remarks. Michelle Mosby.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Good afternoon and welcome to the Richmond Legislative Work Summit for the 2016 Virginia General Assembly Legislative Session. We are honored to have members of the Virginia General Assembly Legislative Delegation represented here today. Thank each and every one of you for your dedication and work on behalf of the residents of Richmond. And as most of you know, each year Richmond prepares proposals for your thoughtful consideration and asks for your kind support in the upcoming Virginia General Assembly session. Each year, the members of the Richmond, Virginia General Assembly delegation have been extremely committed and supportive in keeping important initiatives moving forward and helping prevent legislation that would negatively impact our residents. Each year, you have also shared your wisdom and insight on initiatives that you are bringing forward and have let us know how we can support you in your important work. We look forward to our continuing friendship and our continuing tradition to open dialogue, discussion, and mutual support. Thank you very much again for your attendance and for your ongoing commitment to Richmond residents. With great respect to the importance of your time, because I do understand how important your time is, we hope that the format and efficiency of this meeting is to your liking. Now, in keeping with that efficiency, I will introduce Ron Jordan, who most of you know, our lobbyist, who will present our legislative proposal for the upcoming session. Ron Jordan, thank you.
Thank you. I feel like I'm in the corner here. I've made somebody mad. First item here is being that educational funding is the largest single expenditure that virtually every local government makes. First item here is full support and request for full funding of the re-benchmarking that's done every 2 years for the standards of quality. That amounts to, for statewide, the State Board of Education is recommending $178.7 million the first year and $209 million the second year. As some of you are familiar with, what has typically happened over the years is between the Department of Planning and Budget under the governor and the General Assembly money committees, the amounts adopted by the State Board have been tweaked, shall we say, and the full amount of re-benchmarking has not been provided. The second item is full funding is to restoration of the cuts that were done during the recession for the standards of quality. As you know, over $1 billion was cut out of the SOQ funding during the recession. It was done in a variety of ways. The biggest loss was through the capping of reimbursement for support staff. Another was substituting lottery funds for general funds, and when those lottery funds didn't show up, local governments were on the hook to replenish that money. And certainly when the cap was put on support staff, I know it was the intent of the governor at the time, Tim Kaine, that it be a temporary measure, but the General Assembly subsequently decided to make it permanent. As an example, you'll see there that in 2009, the city received over $60.6 million for K-12 funding for the standards of quality, and then in the current year it's $51.3 million. In addition, JLARC recently issued a report that reports that Virginia spends less to educate each student than a decade ago, 7% less per student when adjusted for inflation. Also, 80% of the school divisions surveyed by JLARC reported that they challenges in recruitment and retention because of teacher salaries, and that high turnover it was affecting its instructional effectiveness, and that teacher support services were declining. Also, JLARC found that Virginia, among all the states in the Southeast, had the highest proportion of local funding as opposed to state funding. Therefore, this is one of our largest priorities. In addition, there is a coalition. You're going to hear a lot about this in the coming session. The city has been invited to be part of a coalition, the Urban Crescent Coalition, that encompasses everyone from Northern Virginia through Central Virginia through Hampton Roads. There'll be a meeting on December 11th in Fredericksburg to come together and formally establish the coalition to restore this funding. This borrows pretty much from the template that was used a few years ago for transportation funding. The next item is Community Wealth Building Fund. This grows out of an initiative that was started under the Mayor's Poverty Commission and has subsequently been adopted by some others. This would establish a $10 million each year Community Wealth Building Fund to provide seed money for local governments with high poverty to begin addressing that poverty by helping them develop plans and begin implementing those plans. By no means would $10 million a year cure the problem. What this is, as I indicated, seed money to begin planning, to put together programs that draw from multiple sources to begin combating pockets of poverty in the high poverty areas of cities throughout the state. The Carillon funding, this was grew out of a proposal, out of a legislation that was proposed by Delegate Carr at the city's request a couple of years ago. As you all may realize, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of beginning of America's involvement in World War I, and Delegate Carr, at the council's request, introduced a resolution to designate the Carillon Advisory Committee as the World War I commemorative group. As you also may know, the Carillon is the state's World War I memorial. This proposal would ask for some funds to implement the recommendations of that group and also state funds to do some renovations at the Carillon. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, last year, 2 years ago, the General Assembly put in $4 million per year. This is critical to providing incentives for increasing affordable housing and allowing people to get into affordable housing. So asking for some additional money there. The next item deals with mental health services. The items here are multifaceted in nature. The first item there, the waiver stats, the waiver funding for waiver slots, deals with funding to implement the Department of Justice consent decree, which requires the institutionalization of the state training facilities for those with mental disabilities. You may have been reading about that in the paper a little bit. The second item there deals with substance abuse services. The third, as it says, deals with childhood disabilities, but also suicide prevention. Suicide among the young is a growing problem. And the last one, again, as you're going to hear throughout a number of these, recruitment and retention of staff. Salaries and have not kept pace with the market. The next item is food deserts. This was also an initiative of the council, and Delegate McQuinn has been a leader in this. It was subsequently taken up by the First Lady in the Commonwealth Council on Bridging the Nutritional Divide, and we're asking for continued funding of that effort. Lastly, under funding is funding to continue to expand prisoner reentry programs. There are a lot of agencies involved in prisoner reentry: Department of Corrections, Juvenile Justice, Social Services, and Department of Criminal Justice Services. This was an initiative, statewide initiative, undertaken during Governor McDonald's administration, and it continues to bear fruit. Research shows that gradual and supported reentry is a key to successful reintegration. Under legislation, redevelopment or conservation areas or rehab districts, what we're asking for there is the ability let me back up and say, under current law, a local government can grant a tax abatement or tax exemption of up to 15 years for properties in a conservation district or economic or rehabilitation area. What we're asking for is the ability to grant a second round of exemption of up to 15 years for that. The next one would be assessment of real property. Again, this section of the code deals with affordable housing and the assessment of affordable housing. We're asking for greater flexibility to do some creative things in the assessment to encourage affordable housing there. The involuntary mental health commitments, I'm honestly going to defer to Mr. Samuels.
Thank you. These are an issue that impact approximately 20 people a day in the city of Richmond, but it is a statewide issue. Whenever somebody is involuntarily admitted to a psychiatric unit of a hospital, they're allowed to appeal that decision to the circuit court, have a new trial, a de novo hearing like the first one never happened. The problem is these are short-term stays in the hospital, and frequently, by the time the person has reached the circuit court level, they've been discharged as no longer meeting the criteria for involuntary hospitalization. With that comes a dismissal of the underlying commitment petition and immediate automatic restoration of their gun rights. They're no longer Code F in the CCRE. So what attorneys can do to represent these folks is wait till close to the end of the 10-day appeal time, make sure the person is out, appeal it, the person shows up in court, the underlying petition is dismissed, their gun rights are restored even if they had tried to commit suicide by firearm or attempted to hurt somebody else with the firearm due to a psychotic break. This is something that obviously needs to be fixed. The proposed way of fixing it is to simply amend what the circuit court hearing is. Instead of a de novo hearing, make it a two-part hearing. One, was the underlying petition appropriate and should they have been committed originally? A de novo review instead of a de novo hearing. And then secondly, now that they are at the circuit court, do they need continued hospitalization or not? That pretty much resolves the issues. Whether or not you want to do the 5-day suspension of your gun rights off of a temporary detention order, it doesn't bother me if you do that or not. The reason I put that in was simply right now you can be TDO'd for no more than 72 hours. And so even if you don't get in front of a judge in time and simply have your petition dismissed because the judge didn't hear it in the 72 hours allotted, then even if you try to hurt yourself or someone else with a firearm, you still have full access to your guns, or to guns in general. It doesn't matter if y'all do that one or not. I think 72 hours is probably long enough, but I wanted to make you aware of it. The second issue, which does not impact 20 people in the city a day, but a significant number, is judicial authorization of treatment. Forced medication hearings. When somebody refuses to take medication in the hospital is allowed to give them medication against their will if they follow a certain procedure. The first thing they have to do, though, is see if anybody has the authority to grant the authorization for treatment that's not a judicial decision maker. And those people fall under 3 categories. Anybody authorized by law, anybody under the Healthcare Decision Makers Act, and anybody under the administrative regulations proffered under 37.2400. Well, the problem is the Healthcare Decision Makers Act has eliminated all the choices under the Healthcare Decision Makers Act. However, the very same people eliminated by that act are specifically granted authority under the administrative regs. It's a complete, they're in conflict. They're 100% in conflict. Additionally, asking somebody's spouse, adult sibling, or parent to force their loved one to take a medication is a difficult decision and can have serious repercussions if that person learns that their dad made them take lithium or Abilify, and can cause a lot of angst and problems, including violence, in the family. A judicial decision maker, a neutral third party that doesn't have any skin in the game, makes a lot more sense. And it would simply be as easy as striking out one line of code under 37.21101. So those are the 2 mental health issues that I wanted to bring up because, again, the city of Richmond does about 20, 25 hearings a day. So this is not impacting a small number of people. The last thing is actually not a mental health issue. It's just a pet peeve of mine that I see on a regular basis. In Virginia, if you strike your household or family member, your spouse, you have the opportunity to keep your record clean by doing anger management, keeping the peace, paying your court costs, and in 2 years it falls off your record like it didn't happen, with a couple of exceptions. If, however, a person were to pull back to strike their spouse and then did not for some reason, that is simply simple assault under a different code section, and there is no opportunity for the person to work that off the record by getting some counseling, help, or treatment that they need. That seems wrong to me, and we see this several times a year in our practices in criminal defense, where the person, for whatever reason, didn't actually make contact, but attempted to make contact with the significant other. And they cannot afford themselves of anger management classes, of working it off the record. It's a problem that I believe should be addressed and could easily be addressed by adding assault as well as assault and battery to the 57.2 code section.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. The next item is high-speed. Go ahead.
I just want to ask Charles, when you get back to the eliminating the, well, maybe not eliminating, but inserting a judicial determination for the taking of meds, what is the judge going to rely on if he doesn't talk to the family?
So the judge can still talk to the family, but what's happening, and this has been a ruling in Henrico and the subject of an injunction in the city, is that the judicial decision maker, the first finding that person must make when the hospital petitions for forced meds, is whether or not there's a legally authorized person ready, willing, and able to give permission. And if there is, then the judicial decision maker cannot approve the forced medications because there's someone higher in rank than him to do it. So what happens is, when I represent people who don't want to take their medications, I ask the doctor, did you attempt to contact the family? What efforts were made to contact the family? And usually they haven't done anything. And the judges have started denying the petitions because they cannot, under the law, rule there's not that person, because there's not evidence to suggest there was any effort made to find that person. Alternatively, what I've had is a family member say, yes, I'm willing to do it, and the hospital refusing to give the medications to the person, even though there's a non-judicial authorized representative there, because of liability concerns.
I didn't answer my question well, and I don't want to take up a whole bunch of time, but in the world that you would ask us to create, how would it work with the judiciary making the determination?
The hospital or the petitioner would simply tell the judge, we believe these are the reasons this person needs these types of medications in these dosages. And then the judge, if there's family there that wants to testify about how they feel about it, that's perfectly appropriate, but they would no longer have to make the decision or have to be asked to make that decision. It would allow for a neutral third party to make the decision instead of somebody related to the person. I mean, it gets down to, if you can't find a healthcare representative named in a specific type of advanced medical directive, then it's like parents, spouse, adult siblings, and it goes all the way down to next friend who has a legitimate interest in the person and has been friends with them for at least 6 months. It's absolutely bizarre. And all they'd have to do is simply say, just cross out the fact that the judge has to find that there is no authorized person, and simply say, upon hearing the evidence, the judge determines that it is appropriate to give the medication.
Thank you.
Oh, also 1108 in that same basic area specifically says you have to look at the people in the Healthcare Decision Makers Act. Healthcare Decision Makers Act specifically says you cannot look to those people for a forced medication here. It's just an absolute conflict.
Okay. The next item deals with high-speed rail, and this is primarily a request to help for you to ensure that the Department of Rail and Public Transportation and the General Assembly continues to and hold the feet to the fire in continuing to ensure that all the plans for extending high-speed rail between DC and Richmond include Main Street Station. The next item, yes, sir.
Does anybody have any information about what numbers we're talking about for that? How much it would cost? I'm just curious if someone's working on it, because everything I've ever gathered on it was that it was going to be massive amounts of money, and that there's a certain amount of technical problems between getting it from Main Street to DC that wouldn't exist if it was in another place. So that's the question I've got, is if we're talking about something that's never going to happen in the next 50 years because of the money, then maybe we could look at something alternative but still have it in the city. So that's why I'm asking the question.
I believe the PPO just got a recent presentation on this, and essentially what they were trying to determine was where the route needed to be to realign. And once they can determine the route, such as a bypass on the eastern side or western side of Fredericksburg City or Ashland, etc., that once they knew which direction they were going to go, that they could get those direct cost estimates. But at the moment, I think that they still believe that it's very much a doable project, even without having the exact numbers in place. And part of the Aki Yard conversation, this might be what you're talking about, coming into the city. It sounded as if in this presentation, and there were some other council members there, that they have a dedicated track through the Aki Yard now for passenger rail that is unencumbered by all the other commerce, and that's already speeding up some of the internal conversation. But I believe that they want to get the route first, and then they're going to come back with a more complete cost estimate.
Delegate Loupassi, Selena Cuffee-Glenn, CEO for the City of Richmond. I know the Department of Rail and Transportation should be coming out shortly with the recommendations that will have some of the estimated costs, so that should be fairly soon for the General Assembly as it relates to the status of not only the route recommendation, but also the costs associated with implementation.
Do you ask a follow-up question? Do you have any idea what the recommendation is?
Not at the moment. Of course, our preference would be Main Street Station.
But the city has other alternatives in place just in case.
So the state is looking at all other options, but that is our primary.
But in the city.
One in the city I've heard, and one outside of the city.
So I think we need to be, in as much as we can, concerned with that.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I would love for it to remain in the city. Because it's
Selena-
essential, it's a central location.
Selena, can we arrange for them to get the same presentation we just got from the Department of Rail?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The next item deals with the urban street maintenance formula. This is a twist or a tweak of a bill that Senator Dance and Delegate Carr carried for the city last year. Right now, the reimbursement by the state for urban street maintenance is based on moving lane miles, and our request is that it be based on total width of pavement of an 11-foot wide pavement. That would provide additional funding to the city for street maintenance. The next item is license plate readers and body-worn cameras, and this deals with the retention period for those records. We're asking that those records and when you look at this issue, and which we expect you will be looking at from many aspects this session, that you provided the ability to retain those records for an extended period of time so that the police department can use them for subsequent follow-up on investigations and not select just an arbitrary short period of time for those.
So what is an extended period of time?
I think the police department would ideally like 60 days. Okay. The next item is an item that the mayor alluded to in his opening remarks, and that's the school funding formula. The State Department of Education just released the new composite index for the upcoming biennium. And in case you didn't know this, the city of Richmond is the 5th wealthiest city in the Commonwealth, according to the LCI. The only cities that are wealthier than Richmond are Fairfax City, Falls Church, Charlottesville, and Williamsburg. We are also wealthier than any percent poverty rate. I think on the face of it, that shows you why the LCI needs work. As you all know, this has been in our package for the last several years. We've made a run at it every year. You all have been wonderful about that, but haven't been able to get any traction, but it's not gone away. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and I know last year there was some discussion about whether you were seeking a study or just to put in the bill to change the formula. As someone who has carried your study bill before, it ain't gonna happen. Probably none of this is gonna happen, but I mean, I do think if you're gonna put anything in, it needs to just go ahead and be a bill to change the formula and not a request to study it again.
The formula's in the Appropriations Act, and we did submit a budget amendment last year to do that, and it didn't see the light of day.
So is that what you're asking for? I guess my question is, are you intending to do that again, or are you going back to the study?
To be candid, I've sat with you in many hours in House Rules on those study resolutions. The study is the best way to go, because if we chose a way, the LCI is so complex. It needs examination by a group of people who can run models, look at alternative scenarios, and the best group to do that is JR. But I fully appreciate your comments and understand.
I mean, and just so that everybody, I mean, number one, the House doesn't like studies anyway, so it is difficult to get a study of any kind out, unless it's one speaker one. Number two, anytime you open up a formula, you create winners and losers, and there are too many people, there are too many areas of the state that have the potential to be losers and have a lot of people representing them, and they stack the rules committee. And that's why this is going to be very difficult. We put it in every year, we have a conversation every year, lots of people nod their heads, we do op-eds about it. And I do think we should continue to have this conversation, but everybody should just keep it real.
McClellan, do you think if we came back rather than, I mean, I know that Ron Jordan was describing it as a study and that you don't think that will get anywhere, and you asked, should we just come in with a direct proposal to change the formula? If we took that approach, do you think that they would actually have more debate? And if we took it in that approach, could we go at it in a sense that addressed poverty statewide, so that the composite index somehow accounted for those who are living in public housing or who are having their cost of living subsidized through vouchers, etc., so that the dollars were somehow tied more directly to the poverty levels that we experience all across the state?
I think this is going to require a longer-term campaign with more than just the city of Richmond. I think this is something that all of the localities that share your problem, and it's a number of them, need to come together early enough to get it in a governor's budget, if possible. That, in my opinion, is the only way you have a shot of getting it done. If it's just the city of Richmond coming in as a budget amendment, it will not happen. And it's too late to do that for this budget cycle, which is why I do think just to keep the conversation going, you do one or the other. But if you really want to have a wider conversation other than when you present your bill at one committee in front of a handful of people, this is something that you need to be working on with other similarly situated localities, particularly those in Southwest who have the same poverty issues, because they're the ones that are scared the most about opening up the funding formula, because they think, well, now all the money's going to go to North Virginia. So I think you make this a something for the next budget cycle that you start building that coalition for now.
And we can simply inventory all the localities that have housing authority and begin talking to them. Because this urban crescent group, that doesn't include your poverty in Southwest, which sounds like that might be the partner that we need to be speaking with.
Well, I think they need to be at the table. I mean, again, the problem with the formula, it only looks at your source of income. It doesn't look at what all of you have to pay for. And that is an issue here, it's an issue in Southwest Virginia, it's an issue in Southside that has nothing to do in and of itself with your housing authority. But you all share the same issue.
One of the things that is the wonderful thing about Richmond is we're seeing a growing middle class and growing middle class incomes. One of the things that's driving this for us is growing income. We have a good number of people who are at the very extremely high end, and we have 25% at the extremely low end. But with all the redevelopment and rebirth within the city, we're seeing the middle grow, and that's pushing and income is a big driver in the formula, and so that's pushing the LCI. Okay. Next item is voting machines. And it comes from the registrar. It's a potential money-saving item. To amend the code to require that if the actual vote is not housed on the machine, that you don't require the machine to be sealed. In the event, in a local election in particular, where you have the potential for a runoff, this would actually require the registrar to rent machines for the runoff, because the old machines would have been sealed. In a contested election, this also came from the registrar, is to require that, as you can see there, contestees in local elections be served with notice within 30 days of the following of election contest. This essentially would conform the procedure for local elections with that for the elections for General Assembly and statewide offices. There are two other items that the council has asked that I bring to your attention. The first is payment in lieu of taxes. As many of you are aware, the Code of Virginia provides a formula for the payment by the state to a local government for services provided by that local government in lieu of paying local government taxes. The code, as I indicated, spells out the formula. The money is placed in the Appropriations Act. For many decades now, the Appropriations Act has overridden the code and shorted the affected localities, and the city is particularly penalized by that. Attempts to change that in the past have not been successful, but the council asked that I bring that to your attention. And the last item that the council has asked that I bring to your attention for discussion deals with council compensation. As you know, council appointed a commission to look at the issue of council compensation. The commission noted that council salaries, not just in Richmond but across the state, unless they have a provision in their charter, and this refers to cities and towns, has not increased in over 15 years. The counties, on the other hand, because counties typically don't have charters, there are various forms of county government in the code, and a number of counties have the ability to set their own salaries. The commission recommended that council salary, that the statute that deals with, the general law that deals with city council salaries be amended. That was the extent of what their recommendation is. They did note that had that been increased based on the consumer price index for urban consumers since it was last amended, that there are the cap now, and it's a cap, is for $25,000 of cities of Richmond size. That cap would now be $36,000 roughly. Council asked that I bring that to your attention and get your reaction to that item also. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the package, and now I'd like to have some discussion on those items for members.
I have a question in reference to the salary issue for city council piece of that. What is the salary for the localities around Henrico and Chesterfield?
That's in the report. The Chesterfield, hold on. Chesterfield County board members make $35,091. Henrico County makes $49,826, and the the chair of those make slightly more, of each of those bodies make slightly more. Again, they're organized under different sections of the code.
But I think in the code it says that they can set their own rate. So in Northern Virginia, these rates are going much higher. There's a cap on the city's component.
Well, listen, I think that they're well deserving of raising the salary. I would put the city of Richmond up against any of those other localities in terms of the workload, okay, that's being done. And it's supposed to be part-time, but never part-time. So they're deserving of a big raise. And I'm hoping that colleagues will support that.
Most of you on this side of the table have worked in local government, so you know. So you have a feel.
Yeah.
Well, I was in regular, but I wasn't getting 48.
That was great.
Is it the same since you wrote them?
Yes, ma'am.
On your appropriations request, have you all had any conversations with the governor's office to see if any of these?
Yes, there's a number of things going on the K-12 funding. There's been a lot of there's a lot of coalition building, as you can imagine, in regard to that. And the governor has publicly indicated that he intends to commit a substantial amount of money to K-12. They've been playing their cards very close to the vest in terms of how they're going to do that, what the emphasis is going to be. But I think Secretary Holton has said publicly in several forums that her belief is that the rising tide lifts all boats, and if they can address the help the struggling schools, then that'll help everyone else. So I think that may be a little bit of an indication where they're going. And as I indicated earlier, the Urban Crescent group, which is borrowing the template that we used for transportation funding a few years ago, is trying to replicate that in putting together a large coalition to restore the cuts. So that part. On the community wealth building, we've teamed with Virginia First Cities, or Norfolk, Newport News, several other cities in the Virginia First Cities Coalition have similar anti-poverty programs that the city of Richmond has started. We are working as a coalition on that, and we have had both individually representing the city and VFC conversations with the governor's office, multiple conversations with the governor's office about that. Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Trammell.
Well, I want to talk about the abandoned properties because I know that Delegate Delores McQuinn and Delegate Manoli Loupassi, now we served on City Council back in the day, and still right now, 2015, we have 1,600 abandoned properties, and I understand that if they cut the grass, they have the properties boarded up, if they pay the taxes, there's nothing the city can do. But what happens when they do not pay the taxes, and we have people that are willing to go in there and buy the properties, fix them up, and get them sold, and make the neighborhood whole again. Because to me, I'm speaking for the 8th District, I know that probably in some of the poorest areas, that's where these abandoned properties are. And when we go to try to find out what do we do, how do we do, we're told it's not the city council, that we don't have anything to do with it. It falls on the General Assembly for them to come up with whatever because of the Dillon rule or something like that. How do we work together? Because as I said, right now I know Channel 8 has did the story, the Times-Dispatch, other news media did the story on these abandoned properties. We've had people on television hollering and screaming, we want to make our neighborhood nice again. We want to get rid of this eyesore over here. We have realtors that's going into neighborhoods trying to buy the properties, but when they go, there's no loved one around. Everyone is deceased, and the property is just sitting there. I have pictures on my iPhone right now. I took up some pictures yesterday, and they were asking me, what do we do? I said I was going to bring it to this body today to see what do we do, especially when the city says we need money. We need money. How are we collecting the back taxes if there's nobody there paying them for 15 years? How do we get the money when we're out there cutting the grass, boarding them up because the undesirable are breaking into them, setting them on fire because they're doing their drug activity, prostitution in these homes and things like that? How do we do that to make that neighborhood whole again? And I have other questions too, but we can just have a discussion on some of that.
And I guess it's, I don't know, did anyone work on housing committees or whatnot? I don't think you guys are on that. But one of the things is just property rights issues that when it comes to the state. I mean, there's a very strong hold there in terms of the support of property rights. And in the past, since I've been there, I know we have sort of moved in the direction of giving, particularly the city of Richmond, a little bit more flexibility. Especially, I think last year we passed something with the nonprofit, or last year, before last, the nonprofit organizations being able to acquire those particular property after it goes through through the courts, and being able to again get that property and take that property and make it, taxable property for the city. So I'm sure that we're going to continue to work on other kind of legislation that would also help to address those issues. But it is a the state of Virginia has a very strong support of those who own property. And so you have a great challenge, what I've noticed since being there, trying to get them to really look at that and change those issues so the localities can have whole communities.
But Delegate Delores McQuinn, you and I both know that it's in some of the, it's in the 7th, the 6th, the 9th, the 8th, and especially on the south side. I mean, in some of the other areas, if there's abandoned property, they'll hold a press conference, whatever, the next thing you know, it's taken care of. It is sold. I mean, we're talking about properties that there is no one left there to claim it. So who's paying for? I mean, can you imagine 15 years of not having taxes paid on that property? 15 years of the city going out there using our resources to cut the grass? 15 years of police officers going out there, firefighters going out there, putting out the fires, boarding it up. We do all that. That's money that the taxpayers are paying. Because there's no, so how, I mean, we can't keep saying that we're gonna let it go on for another 15 years. That's what I'm trying to ask you all, please help me.
Well, Councilwoman, none of us, at least that I'm aware of, are experts in this area. What we would ask that you do is you get with your city attorney. If there's a proposal that you think needs to be floated through the General Assembly, we're happy to look at that. But, I know that you have the ability to put a tax lien on something. I know that you can sell it for that tax lien. If that process isn't working, if those tools that you already have aren't working, suggest some other tools to us, and we'll be happy to take a look at it. I can't make any promises, but I don't know of a tool that you need that you don't have. Obviously, there must be a tool that you need, otherwise you would raise it. I'm just unaware of it, so please, educate us.
One of the things that was tried a couple of years ago.
Mr. Bilal, can you use the microphone? We've heard the folks in the back have said they can't hear.
Sorry.
Those are wireless mics there, so if y'all could just pass them around.
I was just going to say, one of the things that we can dig up that we tried a few years ago was increasing penalties for code enforcement. It didn't get much past the property rights, but it would have allowed the locality. For instance, the more you go back and cite code violations, especially the same violations, the higher the penalty. So eventually, property owners take notice because they're getting hit with, instead of maybe a $100 fine or something like that, which they ignore, or they can pay and it goes away. All of a sudden, they're facing a lot of fines, hefty fines, because the city is coming back out 5, 6, 7 times during the summer. And I believe our crews pay something, $250 or something like that to visit a site just to cut grass. So you can imagine if you visit a site 8 times during the year, just that one property costs you a lot. So that's something I think we can dig up.
We can discuss this later, but I guess my question would be, is that a property where the taxes are paid up on, and the problem is that the grass isn't mowed and it's an abandoned building?
It could be for any code violation. So we can still cite people for code violations that have paid taxes or have not paid taxes. I'm dealing with a house in my district right now. It is, the owner passed away about 8 years ago. The daughter passed away a few years after that. We cannot find anywhere in the country, we cannot find who has the legal rights to that house. It's still in her name. It's $20,000, $22,000 in arrears. And the neighbors cut the grass because they don't want tall grass.
Is $22,000 in the arrears on what, taxes?
On taxes.
So why can't you sell it?
Well, then we're initiating the tax sale. But
It's a lengthy process.
finding the next of kin has been impossible.
And I might add to this part of the conversation and I've got a piece of legislation before City Council that deals with the grass cutting and these funds. State code, it says, yes, you can recover 100% of the cost of doing the work, but then there's an administrative fee that you can tack on to that. And currently, the administrative fee, regardless of how many violations, is capped at $200, is the highest you can go to an administrative fee for code violations, regardless if the person has offended 10,000 times. It also has a cap on how much you can accumulate in these administrative fees in a single year, being $3,000. You cannot fine the property owner more than $3,000. So if you talk about getting to $20,000 of arrears, that's going to take 7 years of us maximizing every year the caps that are imposed on these administrative fees pertaining to code enforcement.
So is the issue that because they're two separate issues, it sounds like. It sounds like the issue is the length of time it takes to exhaust. Is there an owner, or can we do a sale? And it's what do you do in that interim period? Sorry.
Thank you.
So what you're looking for is some tool to help you do what you need to do to address the property while you are trying to exhaust whether or not there is an owner that you can go after for the taxes before you could trigger a sale. Is that the issue?
There's two different issues here. I think there's one where there is, maybe you do know that somebody owns that property. And the issue that I have is when there is no one alive, as Jonathan was saying, no one is alive, but the property's been sitting for over 15 years. And how do you ever get all that money back? When you go to sell the property, does, like, say a realtor comes in and sees the property that's vacant and says, I want to buy these two properties. And then all the neighbors say, well, Mrs. Jones has been dead 10 years, her husband was dead 15 years, no one's lived in the house, no one's paid. We have to call the city to get them out here to cut the grass. We have to call the city to get them out here to board the properties back up. When you got people that want to buy the properties, even one of the neighbors wants to buy one of the properties in over there off of Boston Avenue, but they can't because they can't find out who owns the property. And the city says, well, there's no next of kin that's alive for us to go get the money or even try to sell it. Why do we have to wait 15, 20 more years when that property now, the roof's been caved in? It's like the broken window theory. What do you have then? You have crime in that area.
Maybe and this is maybe just to throw out an idea for our delegation to consider. Maybe it's such that a private trust within a bank could become the holder of any sale proceeds that are net above the cost to the city, and that private trust is there until some next of kin becomes available, so that the city isn't sitting. Because I have truly, I've got a property in the 5th District on Parkwood that they haven't paid taxes in 40 years. The city's already paid to demolish the building that's there, but 40 years is a very long time, and it's actually exceeded the statute of even our ability to reclaim those back taxes by, I think, 10 years. I think the statute says 30 years is all you can get. So maybe if we could establish a trust system where the property owner or their heirs could inherit whatever benefit comes from the sale of that property, that might be able to get us around some of those delays.
Well, again, and that's not a bad idea, but again, I would suggest that you get with Mr. Allen and, give us something in black and white that we can look at and massage. Mr. Jackson, forgive me. I'm thinking about my competitors.
In the past years, we've included requests in our legislative package to support Medicaid expansion. Just want advice, given the harsh reality right now, is there any meaningfulness of including that? We still, across this Commonwealth, as you know even better than us, have more than 400,000 people without insurance still. And so, and certainly in our city, carrying a sizable number of those individuals and families. Is it for naught to look at putting that back in? It's still critical.
I think it sends a bad signal if you don't put it in.
Okay.
And I would say, I think the governor's already made clear that that's an issue that he intends to continue to pursue.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I mean, it's, yeah.
Ms. McQuinn?
Yeah, but a prison reentry program, is there a number that's associated with this in terms of in dollars amount, or even is there a number that's associated with the number of people who are being released from state prison?
We're still working on the number.
Okay, and I think we have something to also look at as well, because the recent federal release, it would be good to know how Richmond is being impacted by that as well, the numbers.
I'm not sure we can get the federal numbers, but we're working on the state numbers going back, because there's so many agencies involved in reentry and trying to pull it all together.
Well, you're gonna have, and the reason I'm saying that the federal, if there's a way to do it, because you're gonna have, I'm certain you're
It'll
gonna
be
have
the
some of
same
those
client,
coming
they all
here.
become the same
Right,
place, exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Who will be facilitating that? What department is that?
It's actually spread out among 3 departments. There's a reentry group that works underneath the Secretary of Public Safety and this was all a big initiative during the McDonald administration. But the agencies involved, there's like 5 agencies, the primary agencies, state agencies. That's Department of Corrections, Department of Criminal Justice Services, Department of Social Services, and Department of Juvenile Justice Services. And there's a working group that works under the auspices of the Secretary of Public Safety on that.
So I'm sorry, I misunderstood this. So you're not asking for additional resources for the city, you're just asking to support
This
this.
correct, because the city is a big beneficiary of those programs. Yes, sir. Mr. Hill.
Yes, thank you. Going back to the formula for the pilot, it's overridden every year. Are there other formulas that are overridden every year?
Oh, yes. Lots of them.
It just, I'm sure we are by far the locality with the largest number of state and federal office buildings in them that are not taxable. I would guess maybe Arlington's up there.
Actually, the biggest value is Hampton Roads because of the port.
Because of the port. I mean, is the formula unique to every city?
No, the formula is statewide in the way it's calculated, and you have to reach a certain threshold in the formula before you are eligible for pilot, and there's allowances in that formula if you have port facilities. The cities, and so just a little quick history, the cities in Southampton Roads, Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Portsmouth, and Newport News came together probably about 10 years ago when Delegate Hamilton was vice chair of the Appropriations Committee and got additional money in there for the ports, for the cities that hosted port facilities.
Well, I guess these facilities are federal facilities or the state?
State-owned facilities.
Okay. I mean, if it's just going to get overridden every year, why do you have a formula? I guess would be my
rhetorical question.
And the local government does provide all of the fire and a lot of the police protection that these buildings necessitate. Were there to be an emergency, I appreciate there's a Capitol Police Force, but it is daunting, and we're willing to accept the risk when the real estate values go down for these facilities, but it's particularly difficult in the city, in our city, and it sounds like in others, to do that. So, but if it's amongst a host of formulas that are overridden, could we get a list at some point of all of these formulas that are just kind of there in theory?
We can try. We can get a couple of the more prominent, but Ms. McClellan.
I think to explain what the process is, if I remember correctly, this pilot was in the code. So the issue is, you have the Code of Virginia, but every 2 years you have a budget, and budget language trumps the code no matter what. So what you have to do every year when the budget comes out is look very carefully at what is in the budget, not just money, but what language is in the budget that is going to override code sections. And that's what Ron means when he says it's overridden every 2 years. It's not that the General Assembly comes in and proactively says, you know, this list of things are going to override. It's more a matter of they do the budget and they say for these 2 years, this is going to happen regardless of what the Code of Virginia says. So.
The word used is notwithstanding.
Correct.
And I have broached this subject over the last, because it's been in the city's package before, and we have discussed it with the senior leaders of the Appropriations and Senate Finance Committee. Quite honestly, the answer is fine. Next time we need a building, we'll put it in the county.
That will be fine, as far as I'm concerned.
Let's not be too quick.
They're not gonna do something that costs more money despite the city's, interest. I would hope not, at least. But, the capital is here. The region benefits extremely from the capital being here, the city less so. So I appreciate that they are here. I think they created a number of jobs, and we love that. That doesn't put any money in the city's coffers.
And as the folks on this side of the table will appreciate, sometimes you weigh those as the juice worth the squeeze, as we say. Would we rather have $10 million for K-12 or $1.5 million for pilot? So that's they're all needs, but as folks on both sides of the table run those, you have to weigh them all.
Any other discussion?
Thank you. You want to close it?
I'm just going to say thank you to me.
Okay. Thank you all for coming, and turn it back over to the president.
I'd just simply like to say thank you so much for coming out today and making this a successful legislative. Mr. Jordan has one more thing he needs to say.
I forgot to do a nicety. I forgot to introduce my colleagues, who you will see throughout the session. John Acosta-Boone with Advantage Strategy. You no longer have just me anymore. So on behalf of the city, John Acosta-Boone and Mark Flynn. Many of you may know Mark from his tenure at VML. Mark joined Advantage Strategies on November 1st. And Mark is intimately involved with the Virginia Housing Commission and will continue to do so.
Thank you. Once again, just want to say thank you all for coming, and we will see you this time next year.